You know, life has a way of throwing irony at you when you least expect it. I guess that's how karma works, just waiting for the perfect moment to hit you where it hurts. My name's James, and I've always been the kind of guy who loved the nightlife. Before I got married, it was all about the clubs, the music, and yeah, I'll admit it, the women. It wasn't like I ever thought of myself as a bad guy, well, I had a taste for adventure, let's call it that. So when I met Lisa, my first wife, I figured I could still have the best of both worlds. She was sweet, reliable, the kind of woman who wanted to settle down and build a life. But, even after we tied the knot, the thrill of those nights out still called me. And yeah, I cheated. A lot. Honestly, I didn't think I'd get caught, or maybe I just didn't care. But eventually, as these things go, Lisa found out. She didn't scream or throw anything like in those dramatic movies. She just left. Quiet and quick, like a storm that had been brewing for years and finally broke. We got divorced, and I figured I deserved it. No surprises there. I was the one screwing up. But here's where it gets interesting. After the dust settled, I met someone else. Her name was Emma. Now, she was different. Confident, beautiful, and she didn't take any crap. Somehow, with her, I stopped all the partying, the cheating. We built a life together, and for the first time, I felt like I didn't need to be out there chasing the next thrill. Emma was it. But life, of course, wasn't done with me. Because just when I thought I'd figured it all out, she met her. It started innocently enough. Emma got a new job and met this woman, Ashley. They clicked right away, like they'd known each other for years. At first, I was happy for her. Emma didn't have many close friends. But soon, things started to feel off. Ashley wasn't just any friend. She was loud, outgoing, always pushing Emma to go out. Girls' nights out became a weekly thing, and before long, they were hitting clubs, staying out late. And Emma, she was loving it. At first, I brushed it off, thinking, okay, she's just blowing off some steam. But then, she started coming home smelling like perfume that wasn't hers, her phone constantly buzzing with texts she'd turn away to check. Something was changing, and I could feel it in my gut. So, one night Emma tells me she's going out with Ashley again. No big deal, right? They've been doing this for months now. But something about the way she said it didn't sit right with me. She wasn't her usual self. Normally, she'd be excited, telling me all about where they were going, what they were going to wear. This time, it was like she was dodging me, keeping things vague. A little voice in the back of my head told me something was up, but I ignored it. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband, after all. Then came the night that changed everything. Emma was supposed to be at some work thing, or at least that's what she told me. I didn't think much of it until she stopped answering her phone around 10 p.m. Now, Emma's usually pretty good about checking in, so when she ghosted me for a couple of hours, I started getting that sinking feeling in my stomach. You know the one, like something's about to go terribly wrong, and you're just waiting for the hammer to drop. I tried calling her again. Voicemail. Again, nothing. Then, almost on a whim, I pulled up Ashley's Instagram. I didn't even really follow her, but that night, something told me to check. And there it was, a story update. Of course. They'd been tagging themselves all over town, and guess what? It wasn't some work event. They were at a nightclub, looking like they were having the time of their lives. I felt a surge of panic, anger, and confusion all at once. A part of me didn't want to believe it. I mean, Emma and I had been through so much. We'd built this life together. There was no way she'd cheat, right? But there was that nagging feeling again, the one I couldn't shake. It was like déjà vu from my first marriage. I knew the signs, I'd lived through this, and the more I ignored them, the worse it would get. So, I grabbed my keys and drove to the club. The whole time, my mind was racing. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions. But deep down, I already knew the truth. When you've been the cheater before, you know the look, the excuses, the subtle shifts. And I'd been ignoring them for too long. By the time I got there, I was seething. I pushed through the crowd, my eyes scanning the place for Emma. The music was pounding, bodies packed together, but none of it mattered. I was a man on a mission. Finally, in the corner by the bar, I saw them, Emma and some guy. They weren't just talking or dancing. No. He had his hands all over her, and they were kissing like they didn't have a care in the world. The sight of it made my blood boil. This wasn't just a girls' night out. This was my wife betraying me, right in front of my eyes. Without even thinking, I stormed over and shoved the guy away. Hard. He stumbled, caught off guard, but he didn't fight back. I didn't even care who he was. He was just some random guy, like all the others from my past. Emma turned wide-eyed, like she didn't expect me to be there. But her shock quickly turned to anger, as if I was the one in the wrong. It was all a blur, but I remember grabbing her by the arm, dragging her out of the club without a word. I felt like I was in a nightmare, like I'd been thrown back into the very thing I thought I'd left behind. Emma was supposed to be my fresh start, my chance to leave behind the reckless life I used to live. And now here we were, back in the chaos, only this time I was on the other side of it. The drive home was silent, but not the peaceful kind of silence we used to share. This was the kind of silence that feels like it could explode any second. I didn't say a word. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight that my knuckles turned white. Emma sat there, arms crossed, staring out the window like I was the one who had ruined the night. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that she was acting pissed at me. As soon as we got into the house, I couldn't hold back anymore. "What the hell was that, Emma?" I snapped. "Is this what your girls' nights are now? Going out to clubs and making out with random guys while I'm sitting here like an idiot?" She didn't flinch. Didn't even try to deny it. She just sighed, like I was some annoying child throwing a tantrum. "Oh, grow up, James. It's not like I planned it, okay? I was just having fun," she said, rolling her eyes. "It was nothing. You're overreacting." Overreacting. I felt my heart race as the words sank in. "Nothing," I shouted. "You call kissing some random guy nothing? You think I'm just going to let that slide?" She shrugged, completely unfazed. "It's not like you've never done it," she shot back, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Don't act all high and mighty now. I know all about your past, James. All those wild nights, all those women. How is this any different?" I froze. For a second, I didn't know what to say. She'd hit me where it hurt, and she knew it. Yeah, I had a past. But I wasn't that guy anymore, and she knew it. I had changed for her, for us. That life was behind me. But now, here she was, using my own mistakes against me like a weapon. "It's different because I've never done that to you," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. "I'm not that guy anymore, Emma. I've never cheated on you. I gave that up because I love you." She scoffed, crossing her arms tighter. "Well, maybe I just wanted to feel what it was like. You know, experience the life you used to live. Ashley said you used to be the life of the party, the guy everyone wanted. Maybe I was just tired of being the boring wife stuck at home while you got to live it up." The sheer audacity of her words hit me like a freight train. She wasn't justifying what she'd done. She was almost making it seem like it was my fault, like she cheated because she wanted to live a part of my old life, the life I'd left behind for her. "That's what this is about?" I asked, stunned. "You wanted to be like me in my 20s? Emma, that life was a disaster. It's why I left it behind. It ruined my first marriage. It nearly ruined me. And now you're telling me you want that." She didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there with that cold, detached look on her face. "Maybe I just wanted a little excitement," she muttered, barely loud enough for me to hear. I didn't think it would matter so much. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't the woman I married. The woman I fell in love with wouldn't have done this. She wouldn't be standing here, acting like it was no big deal, like she hadn't just shattered everything we'd built together. "You didn't think it would matter?" I repeated, incredulous. "Emma, it matters. It matters because you broke my trust. You went behind my back and did the one thing I thought we'd never do to each other. How am I supposed to trust you now?" She finally looked at me, her expression softening just a little. But then, she said something that knocked the wind out of me all over again. "I don't know, James. Maybe we've just been fooling ourselves. Maybe we're not as perfect as we thought. Maybe this was bound to happen." There it was. The truth she'd been hiding behind that icy exterior. She didn't see this as a mistake or a lapse in judgment. She saw it as some kind of inevitability, like this was always going to happen, no matter what. I felt the floor drop out from under me. How could she say that? After everything we'd been through? After I'd changed my entire life for her? It was like none of it mattered. None of it ever mattered. At that moment, I realized we weren't just having a fight. This was something much bigger, something that couldn't be fixed with an apology or a few days apart. Emma wasn't sorry. She didn't even seem to care about what she'd done. And that hurt more than anything else. After she dropped that bombshell, telling me this was all just inevitable, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The woman I thought I knew, the one I'd left my wild past behind for, was standing there acting like she didn't care. Or maybe she did care, but just not enough. Either way, I was done. I couldn't even look at her. I felt my whole body go numb, like everything I had been holding on to suddenly slipped out of my hands. I remember sinking into the couch, my mind racing in a million directions, but not able to settle on anything. How did we get here? How had the woman I fell in love with, the one who used to laugh at my old stories about the nightlife and tell me how glad she was that I'd left it behind, end up chasing that same life herself? And how could she be so casual about it? That was the part that got me the most. It wasn't even the cheating itself. It was the cold, almost mechanical way she talked about it, like it was something that was bound to happen eventually, as if she had checked out of our marriage a long time ago. For the first time in years, I felt lost again. The kind of lost I hadn't felt since my first marriage crumbled after my cheating. Back then, I was a mess, but I deserved it. I knew I was to blame. But now, this was different. I had worked so hard to be better, to leave all those mistakes behind. And yet, here I was, staring down the same road, only this time it wasn't my doing. That feeling of betrayal was like a weight in my chest. It was suffocating. I had trusted Emma with everything. My heart, my future, my sobriety from that old life. I thought she was my rock, the one who had helped me rebuild. And now, in the blink of an eye, I was right back in the same emotional wreckage, only now I was the one getting burned. It's funny, when you've been the one who cheats, you think you know how this all feels. You think you've lived through the worst of it, seeing the pain you cause someone else. But let me tell you, being on the receiving end? It's a whole other level of devastation. It felt like my heart had been ripped out, stomped on, and handed back to me, and I had no idea what to do with it. The worst part was, I wanted to be mad, to scream, to make her feel guilty for what she'd done. But I couldn't. I couldn't even summon the energy to get angry. Instead, I just felt empty. Numb. Like the life we had built together had been one big lie, and I'd been too blind to see it coming. I sat there, staring blankly at the TV, not even watching whatever was on, while she went upstairs and started packing. She didn't ask if I wanted her to stay. She didn't beg for forgiveness or even offer an apology. It was like she had already made up her mind, and there was no point in fighting for us. That was what killed me the most, the fact that she didn't even try to fix it. I thought about all the promises we'd made to each other, the life we'd built. The way we used to laugh together, how we'd talk about the future, about having kids, growing old. All of that felt like it had been snatched away, like a rug pulled out from under me, and I was left standing in the ruins of what I thought was our perfect life. And now, here I was, with no idea what to do next. How do you come back from something like this? How do you move on when the person you thought was your forever looks you in the eyes and tells you that it was all bound to fall apart? I felt sick to my stomach. I hadn't cried in years, but that night, as I sat there in the dark, the tears just came. Quiet, bitter, uncontrollable tears. I was grieving. Grieving the life I thought I had. Grieving the version of Emma I thought I knew. And grieving the fact that, once again, I was alone. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The house felt like a stranger's home now. Emma was upstairs, still packing, and each time I heard a drawer open or a suitcase zip, it was like another piece of our life together was being dismantled. I kept trying to make sense of it all. Was this really happening? Was our marriage over, just like that? The silence between us was louder than any argument we could have had. I couldn't bring myself to confront her again. What was the point? She'd made it clear, she wasn't sorry, and she wasn't staying. I guess the truth was, in her mind, She'd already left long before tonight. Eventually, I heard her footsteps coming down the stairs. She was carrying her bags, her face expressionless, like this was just some routine, not the end of our marriage. I stood up, watching her, waiting for some sign of regret, some flicker of emotion that might show me the woman I had fallen in love with was still in there somewhere. But there was nothing. "I'm going to stay with Ashley for a while," she said, her voice flat, almost businesslike. "I'll come back for the rest of my stuff later. I think we both need some space." Space. That was all she had to say after everything that had happened? I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it, but I couldn't. I was too exhausted, too drained from everything. I just nodded, because what else was there to say? I wasn't going to beg her to stay. Not anymore. As she walked to the door, I finally found my voice. "Emma," I said, stopping her. She turned, her hand on the doorknob, waiting. "Why didn't you just talk to me? If you were unhappy, if you wanted something different, why didn't you say anything? We could have figured it out together." She looked at me, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt cross her face. But it was gone just as quickly as it appeared. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I guess I didn't want to admit that I wasn't happy. And maybe I thought you wouldn't understand. You've changed so much from the guy you used to be, but I guess I wanted to know what that life was like." I stood there, speechless. It didn't make sense. It never would. But I could see that, in her own twisted way, she had made peace with her decision long before tonight. There was no going back. With that, she opened the door and left. I stood there, staring at the empty space where she had been just moments ago, feeling a strange mix of relief and devastation wash over me. This was it. The end. There would be no fixing this, no grand reconciliation. Emma was gone, and I was alone again. In the days that followed, I kept thinking about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the lies, the coldness in her eyes when she told me it didn't matter. And then there was that familiar sting of irony. Karma, I guess. This was what I had done to Lisa all those years ago. And now I knew exactly what it felt like to be on the other side. Funny how life works, right? I spent so many years being the guy who didn't care, who thought love was something you could take for granted, only to find myself completely wrecked when the tables turned. But the truth is, it wasn't just about what Emma did. It was about what I had become. I thought I had moved on, become this new, better version of myself. But deep down, I had been carrying my past with me the whole time. I thought I had buried it, but it was still there, lurking under the surface. Looking back now, I can't help but wonder if this was always going to happen. Maybe I hadn't changed as much as I thought I had. Maybe my past was always going to catch up with me. Emma had been drawn to the life I used to live, just like I had been. And in a way, I couldn't really blame her for it. I had shown her that world, told her all the stories, and in the end, it pulled her in, just like it had pulled me in years ago. The divorce was quick. We didn't have kids, thank God, and the paperwork was simple. She moved out for good, and we went our separate ways. I haven't seen her since, though I've heard through the grapevine that she's still hanging out with Ashley, still going to clubs, still chasing that thrill. As for me, I've had a lot of time to reflect. I've realized that trust is fragile, and once it's broken, there's no going back. I had spent so much time trying to be better, trying to build something real, but I didn't see the cracks forming until it was too late. And that's the hardest part, knowing that sometimes, no matter how much you change, your past can still find a way to haunt you. So, what have I learned? Well, I guess the biggest lesson is this: you can't outrun your mistakes. You can try to build a new life, but if you don't truly face your past, it's always going to be there, waiting for the perfect moment to catch up with you. And when it does, it hits hard. My advice: don't take the people you love for granted. Don't assume they'll always be there, no matter what. Because one day, you might wake up and find that they've walked out the door, just like you did all those years ago. And trust me, when that day comes, you won't be able to do a damn thing about it. Thank you for visited my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.